It's July 10th, 2019, and this is Kate Stalker interviewing Deb Whitehorse. Deb, thanks for coming in. Why do you want to share your story with us today?
Well, my family has been in Monona for many years, and I think I have a unique perspective on that, growing up here and continuing to live here. And my husband's family, the Whitehorse family, has also been here for even longer. So I think that gives me some interesting stories to share.
Great, great. So you grew up here, so your parents are from here?
Yes, on my father's side, his parents were born on the east side of Madison. They built a house. My great-grandfather built it for him. My great-grandfather's name was Life Bribey. He had Bribey Brothers Construction. He built a house for his daughter and her husband, Alma Bribey Roston and Randolph Roston, at 4217 Winnequa Road in 1938. The house is still there, and my grandparents moved out of it in the 80s. And my father, David Roston, and his brother, John Roston, grew up in that house. And on my mother's side, my mother's family has been in Dane County since 1860,
Wow.
and then moved in, let's see, my 5 great-grandparents lived in downtown Madison, and then eventually the family moved into Blooming Grove, which Monona, predates Monona, Blooming Grove Township. My mother grew up on Drexel Avenue on the east side of Madison. At that time, she went to Monona Grove and graduated in 1958. My father he graduated from East High, even though he grew up in Monona, but when he started high school, Monona Grove High School was not yet under construction, so he stuck with East High School. And he went to Frank Alice for elementary, even though he was in Monona. I don't know why he wouldn't have gone to Nichols, but I guess it was considered a Blooming Grove school. So, and my great-grandparents, Life Bribey and his wife Emma, my great-grandparents, who were both born in Norway, they built a house about a block up from my grandparents'. And then they built another house for my grandma's brother. So I have very deep roots in this community.
That's wonderful. So what did your parents do for an occupation? Were they in construction too?
I grew up at 4715 Winnequa Road. First of all, when I was born, we didn't have a house, and until I was a year old, we lived on Monona Drive on top of there was a soda shop, drugstore, and the building's still there. I can't remember the address, but the business at the time that we lived on top of was a old-fashioned soda store. And then when I was 1, we bought a house, 4715 Winnequa Road, the corner of Winnequa and Progressive, and I lived there until I was 18. My father worked for my grandfather and great-grandfather, Capital Plating and Machine Company on Division Street on the east side of Madison. That was our family business. My great-grandfather, Thor Roston, came here from Norway in about 1906. And he developed several businesses in the east side of Madison. He also had something to do with, I believe, Gisholt. He had something to do, I think he worked there as many Norwegians did, and he helped develop something there that he was acknowledged in a book about, that Gisholt wrote about the company. So my mother was a homemaker, and eventually she worked at Winnequa School in the lunchroom. And I went to Winnequa, I went to Winnequa School kindergarten through 8th grade, and which was kind of unusual. And then I went to Monona Grove and graduated in 1978. So I had a really nice childhood of being able to walk across the park to go to school, kindergarten through 8th grade. And then I think I went home for lunch every day. We were so close, there was really no reason to.
Your mother was the lunch lady.
Yeah, she didn't start that until probably I was in maybe 5th or 6th grade.
So what else did you do as a kid running around town?
I remember I loved going to the library, which at that time was in the community center, and I remember it very well. It was in a big room in the community center. I remember when the library was first built and being able to go in that really great big library. Remember, I would ride my bike everywhere around Monona and had a basket and would visit the library quite often and take out a lot of books. A very avid, fast reader, still am. And I also, of course, going to the pool was so fun. And where we lived, you could hear the announcement every hour we had to get out of the pool for 15 minutes. You could hear that from the house, and you could hear the whistles blowing, and there was always something to do. Another great memory as kids, it's an ice cream shop now down in Winnequa. When I was a kid, it was known as the Village Store, or also Dean Store. It's been there since I've been a kid, and getting a buck to go down and get candy was so fun. We always did that, and I often remember this. It just reflects upon the times. My mother smoked cigarettes, and at that time, she could give me a note and money and say, "Please give Debbie a pack of Palmels or whatever." So, I would. And then we'd go to Schluter Beach, and that's where I remember first taking swimming lessons with Schluter Beach, and not the pool. I believe that's where all the swimming lessons were. Another thing I remember is there was a rec program in the shelter house right across the street from my house in the summer. And they'd have probably high school kids run it, and they'd have GIMP, beautiful, all the different colors, and you'd make all the GIMP keychains. That was fun, and I don't know what else we did, but the park was always there to play in, all the playground equipment, or a game of pickup baseball, riding bikes all over Monona. It was a very free childhood, and everything was contained in here that we needed as a kid. And there were a lot of kids to play with. So at that time, it was a really great childhood.
Wow. Do you think it's changed for kids today?
Well, I don't think there's as many kids as there used to be, just because, I guess I'm in the tail end of the baby boom. So maybe that changes things a bit. Of course, things are a lot more structured. We didn't have soccer teams, obviously. I remember we spent a day or two on it at Winnequa when I was in 6th grade in gym class. So much less structured. I think the only structured thing I was on, I remember being on a bowling team when I was in 6th grade over at Village Lanes. And so I think it's, when kids are forced to be bored is not a bad thing, because I kept myself very engaged with the library, the pool, and just, riding my bicycle all around Monona.
Mm-hmm. Did you do things with your family when you were a kid? Take vacations or other hobbies together?
Well, yeah. In the summers, I'll talk about the summers first. My dad was, he helped with open wheel midget auto racing, and they still run them out in Sun Prairie. There were some people in Monona. There was a Monona family, the Krugers, Paul Kruger, who I think he still owns cars. he owned cars, and my dad was one of his best friends, and so we would often go. That's what we would do. We would go to the races, and so that was really fun for my brother and I to hang out at racetracks and run around while they were, my dad and they were busy with the cars. And then in the winter, my dad was a very avid ice boater, and as I'll explain later, that's what we did. We would go to the lake, either Monona or Mendota, and spend the day on the lake when the club was sailing, Four Lakes Ice Yacht Club. My brother and I would go on vacations with my father's parents, Alma and Randolph Roston. But, our family really didn't take vacations, and I don't think it was that big of a thing back then. Or maybe we'd go up north if a friend had a cabin or something like that. But we went to visit relatives in Florida once. So.
Well, you mentioned ice boating and Four Lakes Yacht Club, so
Yeah.
let's move to the present because I know you're very involved with both of those things. Can you talk about a little bit more about what drew you to ice boating? I know you did it from childhood, but
Right.
you're on the other end of it now.
Right. So Four Lakes Ice Yacht Club was, I think, officially established in 1925. Previous to that, there's been ice sailing on Madison Lakes, on Lake Monona and Mendota, since the 1860s, actually. And there's I can talk for hours on the history of that. I'll focus on Four Lakes. So my father was well known as a builder of ice boats, particularly the Skeeter class. He grew up on Lake Monona. He watched the club sailing on Lake Monona, and he followed the Mary B, which is still a very well-known stern steerer, and that's how my father got involved. And then we moved to Winnequa Road. We were in a modest ranch house, and he set up a workshop in the basement. And the summers were spent building ice boats. And our house was really dusty, and that was the years before dust collection. And then the club would have like gatherings down here at right across the street from the library here at the shelter house. For many years, that was our kind of kickoff to the season. We'd have our ice boat picnics, and we still do have ice boat picnics. And I always enjoyed it because that was the only day where we could, as kids, drink as much pop as we possibly could, and nobody would say a word. And so I really enjoyed going to the lake and being out with the boats, watching my dad sail and race. My dad won many championships, and all the people from the club coming over. It was really like a family, and I enjoyed being with them. And then one day I kind of realized that most other people don't have this experience, and that was really brought home to me. We had one of the midgets in the driveway that, I don't know why, midget open wheel cars, and all the neighborhood boys, you couldn't keep them away. And then they started asking me about it, and like, well, don't you know about this? And they were quite impressed. So at that point I was like, gosh, I guess we do things a little differently than other families. We're involved in these sports that are kind of a little bit different than everybody else. So then in the early 80s, I built a DN, and with the help of people. I helped people build my DN, and I became the club secretary. I think I've been the Four Lakes Ice Yacht Club secretary, oh my gosh, pre-internet. And then the internet came in, and I created a website for my husband's business, Whitehorse Gallery, Harry Whitehorse, and then I created a website for the Ice Boat Club for Four Lakes, and that's iceboat.org, and it celebrates 20 years being online and with me as the webmaster since in November it'll be 20 years.
Wow.
So 1999, and it has over 2.5 million hits.
Wow.
So, and that kind of expanded my network of people. I mean, now I know ice boaters all over the world, and I've been lucky enough to travel all over the world and experience it, and participate with race committees and help run regattas. Quite a bit of, continuing to do the website, which I still find really fun to do. And so now, 10 years ago, I was hired as a contractor for the International DN Ice Yacht Racing Association. And I'm the executive secretary. I'm also the elected secretary, and right now I'm the elected treasurer. And so our organization, we have 18 countries in it. And I mean, I guess as a kid, I always wanted to have pen pals from wherever. Well, I've got tons of them now, through email, really good friends all over the world, and, that I can visit and see and enjoy being with them. And it's still that family feeling. Even, ice sailors still have that, no matter where you are in Russia, Estonia, Sweden, Montana, they all have that. It's a certain kind of people that like to be on the ice and are kind of willing to tough it out, And so I that all started because my dad grew up on Lake Monona.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know you travel quite a bit. It's hard to find you here in the winter.
Yeah, I'm traveling, oh boy, to many regattas, to the ISA, International Skeeter Association, Northwest Ice Yacht Racing Association, Renegade Regattas, the DN North American Championships, the DN World Championships, and oftentimes the European Championships. And I have gone to Finland for their championships that they have on the 46th week of the year, which is November. It's the first regatta. I've become quite a seasoned traveler, and that's always something I wanted to do too. And so I really enjoy traveling. And then in the DN Association, the European Association has a annual spring meeting in different European capitals. So this spring I was able to visit Vienna for the meeting, which is, I always, of course, get there a few days early to do a little touring, and that was my second time there. And then I stopped in Sweden and visited friends, ice sailing friends who not live in Sweden. So yeah, I'm really lucky that way.
Yeah, you are. Do you ever race? Or do you watch?
No, I have raced in the 80s, but I can sail a boat, but when we're at regattas, I'm generally doing the scorekeeping, and helping with race committee, helping set courses, just everything. Being available for competitors if they have questions of anything. Helping with registration, so that keeps me really busy. And so somebody put it this way once, that I do all the things so that the racers can have fun.
Yeah, I'm sure you have fun too.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So has ice boating changed over the years, or does it remain mostly the same?
Yeah, there have been changes. For instance, my dad raced a skeeter, Class A skeeter, which is an open class, meaning there's no restriction on it other than 75 square foot of sail. And when he was racing and building them at a regatta, we'd have 50 of those boats show up to race. Eventually, those boats turned into Formula One absolute speed demons because of the introduction of carbon fiber, titanium, Kevlar. To build one now is quite a bit more money, so there's not as many of them. Maybe at a regatta we might have 12, where, and they're still absolutely beautiful boats, but the technology has changed there. So I would say that's changed. I think that another thing that's changed is you have to be willing to travel to sail ice boats. When I was growing up, we were lucky to have pretty good ice locally and constantly, where we could be on the ice every weekend. And now, the lakes are not freezing that well so much anymore. It's a different time, and it might freeze and then we'll get all kinds of snow, because we are seeing snow here earlier than we ever did before. So that means that we're traveling into Minnesota, we're traveling into Michigan, we're traveling to Indiana. So if that's changed quite a bit. You have to be willing to travel. I don't think ice boating is ever going to explode and be a very popular sport, because it's tough to do. It's worth it. I mean, if you're addicted to it, you'll think nothing of getting in your car and driving to Montreal, to go to a regatta. And when you get there might not be wind. You might have perfect ice. So it takes a very different kind of person that you have to have an optimistic view of life, or get something else out of it. Being with the people, the craftsmanship of the boat. So those are some of the changes I've seen.
Wow. Do you have a favorite memory of anything that's happened to you as a part of Four Lakes Yacht Club?
Well, I remember as a kid that when going out to the race course and coming back, that I would sit on the runner plank of my dad's Skeeter, and that was a time before helmets. And so you would just sit with my feet to the back, and that was like freedom. It's like, no, who else? And I didn't know, you didn't know enough. You were, some people might have been scared, but I wasn't, and it was like, I know how to be on the ice. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I've had people come out with me that don't know how to be on the ice, and they get a little scared. And I've been lucky so far that, I've been doing this long enough that I can look at ice, and tell if it's good or bad, and I'm always prepared with like ice picks and that in case the worst happens. But I guess that's one of my strong memories. Another one is being on Lake Baikal in Siberia, which it was like I could have been on the planet Mars. The things I got to do there were incredible. Being in a hovercraft and going to the deepest part of Lake Baikal, which I believe is over a mile deep, and surrounded by these caves and not a person in sight. And it was, it was surreal. It was absolutely surreal. And then how this community of ice boaters from all over the world come there every April and race and have a good time and be together for a week. And the color of Lake Baikal, it's a jewel blue. It's unbelievable. And there's a Buddhist stupa there that's quite near where we stay. That visiting that and doing the ritual of walking around that. I can't remember how many times, but there's a ritual that you do to acknowledge it and kind of think about things. And then it's a place full of shamans and prayer flags, and it's very spiritual for the indigenous people there, and getting to see that and see some of the similarities that I saw with, other indigenous people from here was really something. So, and like I've written, ice boating is a vehicle, and it takes me places.
Yeah. Oh, lucky you. So you mentioned indigenous people here. You were married to Harry Whitehorse.
Yes.
And you worked with him at the Whitehorse Gallery. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Harry and I married in 1993. Our daughter June was born in 1994. Harry was born in 1927. He passed in 2017. He was born in Black River Falls, in a traditional dwelling of the Ho-Chunk people. He's part of the Ho-Chunk Nation, and he's Bear Clan. He was mentored by his uncle George Seymour from a really early age. George Seymour was a silversmith and an artist in his own right, and Harry was always creating, and eventually he became a professional artist. His family purchased the land. His parents, Annie Greencrow Whitehorse, and his father, Ralph Reuben Whitehorse, purchased the land where I live in 1932. And they did that because previously they had been kind of living a nomadic traditional life where they would go to the cherry trees to harvest cherries at that time, and then go to the potato fields and so forth and so on. And at that time, they were able to set up their cheputake, or their wigwams, and camp on farmers' lands. Well, in the 30s, the farmers started getting nervous that what I've been told is they may have felt that if they let them camp there, then they could have a claim to it. Mm-hmm. So they had been coming here to Dejope, they call this, for, they had always come here, and so they purchased the land on what is now East Broadway. When they purchased it, there was no East Broadway, and it was eventually a road came in, and then that's where Harry grew up, and it was a lot of the relatives would, all the Ho-Chunk relatives would come and visit. There were, where Pick and Save is now, used to be the Pepsi plant, and previous to that, it was a natural amphitheater, pre-development. And even as a kid and as a young man, Harry's family would sponsor powwows there. Mm-hmm. And they would have, the relatives would come for many days, and they would, dance and drum and sing.
On the site of the Pick and Save.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And Harry also would remember Ho-Chunk families living, what's that name of that restaurant? Monona Gardens. There's woods next to that, and Harry remembered Ho-Chunk families living in there. Harry had a large extended family living with him, just typical. And his uncle George Seymour lived there down on East Broadway, and he, in the years of the Depression, the WPA put in the stone fences on Monroe Street near the Arboretum, and Harry remembers George walking to work there. Wow. He had employment there, and so Harry joined the Navy during World War II, as did his brother Walter. I think Harry was probably 16 years old. He was quite young, and he was a machinist mate. He did train for underwater demolition, UDT, the precursors to the Navy SEALs, but then the training was a little risky back then, and Harry made a decision that he'd rather be in the machinist mate. So fast he saw museums of Europe, and at that point he decided he wanted to be a professional artist. He always says that his shipmates would go to the bar, he would go to the museums. And so when he returned from World War II, he and his brother Walter opened a business, Chief Auto Parts and Chief Auto Body. Harry owned the body shop, and Harry married Marlene Drager, and they had 8 children, and raised the family here. I know at one point the family did live on Bridge Road, and then they moved down to East Broadway. So Marlene passed away in the mid-'80s, I believe, probably 84. And so, and Harry, in order to support his family, he maintained had the body shop, and the boys worked there. And he kept, but he also pursued his career as a professional artist. And has many pieces around Dane County, around United States and the world. And some of them here in Monona include one that was commissioned by Dr. Darris and Dr. Shropshire, who owned the clinic on Monona Drive. And, of course, I believe Dr. Shropshire delivered me. And that was my family's clinic. We went there. It was built in the 60s. So Harry created a statue called the Greek God of Healing, or the Latin word is Asclepius, and he was commissioned by Dr. Darris and Dr. Shropshire, and the statue is made out of metal. And Harry developed a process where he would cut pieces of metal like a puzzle, pound them out, weld them together, grind the welds down. And because that's one of his first projects was a statue out of marble, which I believe he exhibited down at the Art Institute in Chicago. And he sold it, and he said never again. It was too heavy to schlep around. So this Greek god of healing went in front of the Monona Grove Clinic, and it was there for many years, arms outstretched. Harry mentioned to me once that they were thinking about making him, the Greek god, hold a very shallow basin and make a fountain out of it. But I don't know why that was never done. There's some stories with that. One being, I believe in the maybe late 60s, early 70s, the statue was vandalized in the middle of the night. I would assume some young people broke it off at its feet, and it was found in the back of a gas station at the corner of Dean Avenue and Monona Drive. And so then Harry put cement in it, because it is hollow, to prevent that from happening again. It's a stylized picture of a male nude, and I know there was at least one person in Monona who was a woman who was highly offended by it and asked that fig leaves be put on it, and I think she would write letters to the paper, but that kind of blew away. Then eventually the Monona Grove Clinic was sold, and I believe it's UW Health Physicians Plus now, and they built a brand new facility actually directly to the east of our house on East Broadway. Beautiful facility, and they brought the statue down. So Harry was, and I still can, and Harry was able to see the statue right from our kitchen window, which was really cool.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so, and then before they installed it there, they did bring the statue to our place, and Harry freshened it up. Mm-hmm. And so that's, and then I know when they put it in there, they were going to make sure they planted native plants around it, one being milkweed, which is an important food item for the ho-chunk. It's, the past few weeks have been the time when they eat it, and the Latin name for milkweed is Asclepias, which I always thought that was a really nice coincidence.
Wow. So you have another business in addition to the Whitehorse Gallery and Four Lakes. You have Whitehorse Communications. Can you tell us about that?
Right. So that stemmed out of being previous to that. I have an associate's degree in architectural drafting, and so I worked in lumber yards. I worked at Fish Building Supply. Then I became a kitchen designer and worked for myself in the 80s. And then when Harry and I married, I stopped that and concentrated on helping him with the gallery. And then when I started making websites, people started asking me to do them. And so I create websites, and as I mentioned before, with the International DN Ice Yacht Racing Association, I have a contract with them, to be their executive secretary. So, I think one of my taglines is "handy with a computer." So I can, I continue to create websites or help with administrative things that any business might need. Excel, Photoshop. Our daughter June is a photo retoucher and editor for a fashion company in San Francisco. And so she has definitely taken after her father, and she's very creative. And then she also volunteers for the Berkeley Free Health Clinic, and she's very involved with that. And she designs graphics and things for a lot of volunteer organizations out there.
Oh, nice. How do you think June's childhood differed from yours?
Well, I would say, and I'll say this speaking for Harry's children with Marlene as well, that down on East Broadway, we're isolated. There are no other children around. So, that's where I lived on Winnequa Road. There were tons of kids. You leave in the morning and hang out with your friends all day. With June, it would be, I would have to drive her to be with friends, or they would have to come to us. So that's different. What's the same? Dropping her off at the pool, so she spent a lot of time at the pool. She actually worked at the library all through high school, and she really enjoyed the job. So she loves books, great reader like Harry and I. Those were the same. Different than me? Well, she got to go a lot of places. She would come with us Harry was involved with snow sculpting competitions. And I remember her being 1 year old, and we'd take her into Michigan, into Milwaukee, Rockford, wherever Harry was competing. She got to go to auto races. Harry's sister's family was involved in IndyCar racing, and so she got to go to many IndyCar races in Indianapolis, Indianapolis 500, sprint car racing in Knoxville. She got to go ice boating, so she got to go quite a few places, travel quite a bit.
What an interesting childhood.
Yeah.
Wow. So in closing, you've had a very interesting life, and out of all the things you've told me, I'm curious about what accomplishments you might be most proud of.
I would say I'm really proud of what June has become. I think I texted to her the other day something like, "I'm really glad you don't care about, popular culture and fashion and the Kardashians and all that." And she said back, "Well, how could I? I'm, given who my parents are." And that's what I'm proud of. I'm also very proud of iceboat.org. That has, for 2.5 million hits and, making really, anytime anyone Googles iceboat, that will go to iceboat.org. So that's pretty amazing to be known around the world. Monona is known around the world for iceboating. And iceboaters around the world want to come on Lake Monona and sail in front of that beautiful skyline. So, and I'm happy to have played a part in bringing Monona to the world.
Yes, yes. So you may have just answered my last question, which is what is the one thing you most want people to remember about you?
Well, that I took what I was given and took the gifts I was given and made the best of them. I used them. I think I've said it before, that at the end of the day, you're given gifts, you're born with them, and I think at the end of your life, if you can say, I took what I was given and I made the best of it, so that's that.
Well, thank you very much, Deb Whitehorse, for sharing
You're very
your
welcome,
story.
Kate Stalker.